Welcome to the show, Dr. Louann Brizendine. How are you doing today?
Just great, thanks. It's like really, really nice to be here with you, especially with your audience, because I feel like you guys are my people.
We are literally your people. I know that my community is going to go crazy for your book. And I mean, you have been such a pioneer in the field of understanding women's brains, how they are different, how they are complex, how they integrate and connect with our endocrine system. And so you've got a new book out that, I mean, the second I saw this book, I was like, please, we have got to get to Dr. Louann on the show.
Yeah, you can pet yours. I'll pet mine. We'll have
Yes,
like
I have it
we
right
have
here.
twins. We have the twins. We have the twins right
I
here.
just
The
got it a
twins
couple
right
days
here.
ago. And even with a toddler, I spent about an hour already reading it. It was a major priority for me. And this is basically, it's called The Upgrade, How
Well,
the
I hope
Female
you like
Brain.
it. I hope it reads really easy.
Oh, yeah. So I love it so far. But I was just so excited. Like, because here's the thing. I think so many of us, I know my mama was told this, my grandmother was definitely told this. And so many of my community members, the women who reach out to me, tell me that they've been told that it's a slow decline after midlife, right? That their cognitive decline is imminent, and that there's probably nothing that they can do about it because it's just what they've been told. And what you do is you flip that myth on its head. And this is a book about how our brain actually upgrades with the pivots, because you and I both know things are changing in perimenopause and menopause. The brain is changing, our endocrine system's changing, neurotransmitters are changing. But you're saying that with a couple tweaks, we get to elevate, we get to upgrade, and we get to be like super stoked for what's to come.
Absolutely, no doubt about it. And that's why I changed the language because it's, these little words like perimenopause, those are medical words or made by the pharmaceutical companies and to indicate an illness, something that's a disease to be treated. And so, that's not the whole woman. The whole woman is going through a transition there in their 40s up to the 50s. And then, when the period stops and you go in, it's like one day technically of menopause and then you're into the post-menopause for the next 50 years of your life. It's not just post-menopause for the rest of your life. You have all kinds of richness in the whole woman approach to that part of your life. And nobody has ever given this other stages and developmental stages of a woman after the menopause any divisions, even though there's 40 or 50 years. So I think we need to fix that. So that's what I'm trying to start. I'm trying to push the start button on that.
I love it. Well, I have been on that start button train myself. So I am resonating with you. We were just having a conversation because I just got way too excited. Like, right out the gate. And I was like, oh gosh, we got to push record here. But you were talking specifically, because I think a lot of women, there's still not even a lot of clarity as to what goes on in our fertile years and our cycling years with that dance between progesterone and estrogen, and specifically that dance that happens in the brain when those two hormones are elevating and shifting and changing throughout our menstrual cycle. Would you give us a little bit of a breakdown there? And then
Yeah.
talk to me about kind of what shifts and transitions as we move into our 40s, 50s, and into that next beautiful phase of our life.
So the cool thing to know is, okay, let's get us all on the same page. So the first day of bleeding is what we call day one of the menstrual cycle. So in that first week of the menstrual cycle, you kind of like you're having your period, whatever, and what's happening under the hood is that estrogen is starting to build up to get ready for the next cycle. So then in the week two, as you're climbing higher estrogen before ovulation happens, the studies we know, so remember, the purpose of a hormone is to cause a behavior. Like the hunger hormone causes us to be hungry and eat. The sex hormones make us want to have sex. So the estrogen increase right before ovulation, there have been studies that show that women they sway their hips more. We become more flirtatious. Our pitch of our voice even goes up higher. Things that we don't know that's going on subconsciously for us, but these behaviors are happening because Mother Nature wants us to like be flirtatious with the male to attract the best sperm. We're out there we don't know it, but we're out there trying to get the best sperm or, pick the best fathers for our children. That's what we're doing in those like 3 or 4 days before ovulation happens. And then, of course, our testosterone's a little higher and it makes us horny and want to have sex. And it's all sort of choreographed. It's sort of a weird thing to think that it's all going on under the hood by hormones, but obviously that's not the whole story, but that's a piece of it. And then as soon as the ovulation happens, boom, the progesterone starts and it undoes all the circuitry in the brain. It kind of like puts weed killer, like Roundup weed killer on the all the circuits that were made for
sprays
those two
sprays
days.
down that flirtation.
Yeah, it goes down, down, down. You just kind of start. It gets makes you a little bit more chill, a little bit more chill, and you're not so like out there and flirtatious. You're kind of in a different. And then of course we know what happens the day or two before we get into that PMS thing. That's a whole other thing. But what you need to know is that all these hormone changes are causing behaviors on us, are causing emotions in us, are causing like things that we are going to do that have to do with our fertility dance. And the attractiveness, figuring out how we want to look better than other women, because it all has to do with attracting the best sperm. Now that goes on in our lives for our 20s and 30s and up into our 40s. That's that whole cycle is going on all the time in the background. We don't even know it subconsciously why we're getting pushed in that direction. And then what happens after the transition and the period stops is like, boom, that's not, you're not being pushed and pulled by those hormones every month all the time. You have this freedom called the upgrade. You have a whole lot of freedom to choose to do other things that you want to do, to be like sort of more your authentic self at that point. So I think women don't appreciate how wonderful that change is. I mean, getting there during the transition slash AKA perimenopause is something we can talk some more about. And we doctors have things that we can help you with. So you don't need to suffer like a lot of women are currently suffering. We're going to help to get you through that. But on the other side, the cool thing is it's kind of like Alice and you're walking through the looking glass, and you're going to have an upgrade where the circuitry isn't going through that building up, tearing down every single month.
I love that. And I talk so much about that too, is that this is an opportunity where having a optimal 28-day cycle, there's so much energy that is required to run that cycle every single month. And then to not have it, oh, not only is there physical energy, there's mental energy. Like you've got space, to really step into something bigger. And that's exactly what you're talking about right now, is that we're not being pulled in the estrogen progesterone tether, every single month, multiple, throughout the month. Now we've got this kind of freedom of really redefining what it looks like for us. So I would love to kind of speak into what are some of the shifts and changes as estrogen and progesterone are not pulling on our neurocircuitry as much as consistently as they do during our cycle. Kind of what are some of the experiences that we start to notice?
So I think that a good way to visualize what's happening, it's almost like during these fertility years we're talking about, it's almost like your everyday path, your path along life is down close to the tide line, where the tides are coming in and washing away all the brain connections that happened during the first 2 weeks, and then they go out as you build them back up and they're going away. So you're always getting this tidal waves of pushing and pulling. But then when you hit the upgrade after your period stops, you're walking up on a path that's a little higher on the hill. You're just more stable. You can see further. Every day is going to be more similar. You're not going to have all these connections in your brain building up and washing away and building up and washing away. And you're able to really like find a new purpose and a new path in life. So that's what's happening in the brain with your circuitry becoming much more steady and stable. Even if you take HRT, you're getting a daily dose of the same thing. You're not having these waves that come and go.
I so appreciate that analogy. That makes it so much more clear. And just painting the picture. I know we talk a lot about the phases of our menstrual cycle here on the show, but then, like I said, over like in perimenopause, that starts to kind of blend. It starts to kind of, like you had said, fray earlier and then we move to where, your ovaries are bowing out, the sex hormones are bowing out. And then it's just a lot more, there's just more clarity I find in that new place that we get to be in menopause and beyond.
Absolutely. And I think women need to know that there's something really good waiting for them. Because it's like, it's kind of in childbirth in a way, it's like you have a lot of pain and suffering sometimes, not all women, but about 20% of women have a lot of pain and suffering through the perimenopause. And we have a lot of tricks to help you ladies out there that are going through that. And it's hard to realize that when you're going through the sweats and all that, and we can talk about why estrogen does that in the brain, but it's all going to calm down at some point. And you can also get help with it before you're completely out of the perimenopause. I really suggest that women probably start getting onto some kind of consistent hormones before that. because it's going to really stabilize you out and let you sleep better. We can talk about the what you need to do for yourself. It's kind of like a stool, you know, a stool with three legs.
Mm-hmm.
There's three legs to keep that stool really steady. And we all know that it's kind of like one of the legs of the stool has to do with your activity and your exercise. You know, you need to get cardio 3 to 5 times a week for at least a half an hour. That gives you one leg of the stool to really firm up all of that part of your body. The other one is eating, you know, a really healthy diet like the Mediterranean diet or something like that, whatever your nutritional balance is. And the third leg of that stool has to do with getting the right amount of sleep. And why that's so important is what we've discovered in the last 5 or 10 years about something that happens in the brain is that when we're awake and during the day, you know, our brain cells are all chatting with each other. They're all trying to problem solve. They're doing all kinds of things. You know, we're doing we women are doing way too much, whatever, all the time. And those little things of the brain cells trying to do all that problem solving, all the stuff you're doing, they're making all kinds of garbage as they do that, called the garbage proteins. The proteins are just like all through the whole brain. But then when you sleep, these cells kind of shrink back from each other a bit and leave these channels in between the brain cells for it to come and hose out all the garbage. And if you don't flush out all the garbage while you're sleeping, your brain is going to get clogged up and get more of that brain fog. So the reason you must sleep and have good quality sleep is because you've got to have the garbage flushed out of your brain while you're sleeping.
Agreed. And I know I want to get into sleep because I know this is a big part of the book too. And one of the things I always advocate as well is, you know, nix the late night eating, because if your body's having to digest, it doesn't allow for the brain to, again, those glial cells to wash that cerebral spinal fluid through the brain. I call it the car wash, the brain wash. And so I'm a big proponent of people trying to like no meals 3 hours before bed, and making sure that you have your sleep routine and that you're getting good night's sleep, because you really want your brain to have that opportunity to really clean up shop in the evening, which I think is so critical. So those three pillars, movement, food, and sleep, are the three big pillars that we should be probably operating well before we even get into menopause, I'm guessing.
Yeah, you got to get that down and then nailed down. And the reason I focus a lot on the sleep during the transition and the upgrade is obviously you got to clean up the brain every night, but also that because of the hormone shifts in the perimenopause slash the transition, a lot of women end up getting a lot of difficulty with sleep. Because if you're waking up because you're having a hot flash and you're just like drenching the bed, you got to get up and change your pajamas or just like, you know, whatever you're doing that's interrupting your sleep is not letting the garbage get flushed out of your brain. So of course you're going to wake up in like not only a bad mood, but your brain's not going to be functioning well because you haven't hosed out all the garbage in your brain during the night. So that's why I really focus on the, you know, really getting a hold of that. Whatever it is that's interrupting your sleep, we got to get a hold of what's called sleep hygiene. And a lot of us have the eating down or the exercise down to some degree. I mean, it's like we have to discipline ourselves, of course, but this other piece of the sleep, I think, because we're always on screens, we're always watching this, you know, there's way too much that interrupts us, doesn't let you have the really good sleep. And if it's got to do with your hormones, like being jagged all over the place and making you sweat like a pig. Should we talk about
yeah, let's talk about the transition. Let's talk, because like you mentioned before, you know, and I'm so grateful that the more and more clarity is coming out. So often women thought that the transition into menopause was menopause, and now we know it is not. It is the what I call
it's the drum roll. It's the drum roll.
It's the drum roll. It's the perimenopause spectrum that's happening. And like you had said, I think all women are going to feel a difference. You know, you can call it, you know, reverse puberty, right? We ramped up and now we're ramping down. And for some women, depending on lifestyle, even metabolic function, there's a lot of players here, but definitely hormones are the big ones. As we start to ramp down, symptoms can get pretty intense. And so I love, and definitely, you know, women, but one of the biggest top 5 complaints from my audience is brain fog. 100%. And how they describe it is, I just don't feel productive. I don't feel as productive as I used to. I'm not firing on all cylinders like I used to. Like I'm just not able. And they're so concerned that it's going to stay that way in menopause and beyond as well. And so I would love.
Don't you find that people come in and fear, well, my grandmother had Alzheimer's and dementia. Like,
Yeah.
am I getting it right now?
Yeah.
Whatever.
Is
And you're
that
like,
what
no,
this
no, no.
is?
Yes, that's what it is. I'm getting early dementia, whatever. And of course, no. So let me chunk it down like I did in the book into like, the transition I put into different categories. And remember, I don't attach ages to any of this because between 45 and 55, 80% plus of women will go through the perimenopause and finish their periods in that 10-year period. So there is a chunk, but then there's outliers. 7% of women will be finished by age 45.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
then there's a little chunk that won't be finished till almost 60.
60.
So,
Yeah.
and then
It happens.
there's a 1% that goes through before 40. I call what's called the pre-transition years are about age 37 to 41 or 42, because that's the stage at which the ovaries, at birth, we're all given about 1 million eggs. And then by the time we even start our period, there's only about 500,000 left. They're dying off all the time. Remember, men's testicles make sperm. They're not given a certain amount and then they use them all. They continuously make them all the time, day and night, every second of the day. They are making sperm until the moment they are even past when they're in the grave, probably. But so that's what the difference. But so we have run out of a lot of our eggs by the time we hit 37. We all know that that's kind of a transition where our eggs are really starting to go on in terms of their quality, and the ones that are still there are getting older. So between 37 and 41, that's the time which I call the pre-transition. So you're usually not having hot flashes, you're not having sleep problems, you're not having any of these symptoms at all.
Not yet.
But underneath the hood, I just wanted to raise the hood to look what's going on in the ovary and the brain. So things are still working okay. So that's the pre. The very first stage, usually, of the stage, kind of stage one of the transition, I call it, it's usually 41, 42 to about 45. And what you notice is that in medicine is, we used to do this. We used to do a blood test called the FSH test. And we have some other ones that we're, trying to figure out these days. But really a blood test isn't going to help you as much as if you're a 28-day girl every month and then your cycle starts to drop to like 27 or 26. It's the shortening of the cycle that will tell you about the stage that your ovary and brain are starting to not communicate with each other as well, because the eggs are running out and you're not as fertile as you were. So that will happen probably in that first stage. And sometimes you'll get a little bit warm. What I found for me, I don't know if you found that for you too, or your listeners, are that I used to do the elliptical a lot. That was one of my exercises. And I found that I would get off of it and you're kind of used to how long it takes you to cool down. It takes you whatever time it does. And then I would find that, wow, even like, I don't know, I wasn't cooling down as fast. I was still like hot for quite a while longer. So something starts to change a little bit at that stage with the temperature sensor in your brain. Remember, the temperature sensor in your brain, here's an example of what happens. If you're in a room with a bunch of people and someone changes the temperature in the room by 10 degrees, everybody's probably hot, right? It goes up, everybody's probably hot. When you're in this stage of the perimenopause / transition, if someone changes at 1 degrees, almost nobody feels hot, but you do. You may even start sweating. So what's happened is the temperature gauge in your brain has started to narrow because of the changes in the estrogen that's in your brain. It gets more and more so. So in the middle, what I call the mid-transition years, you may be having a couple of nights where you're not getting good sleep because you're a little bit warmer than usual. You're not cooling down as much. You may start to get, a little bit more irritability because you're also maybe not getting as much sleep. So there are some symptoms that start in that early, and the mid transition is when they really can start, where your cycle is shortening even more, maybe down from 28 to 24. Sometimes you may even have a cycle where you think at the late transition and up into the you may be having like what you think maybe 2 periods a month. You may be spotting in the middle. There's all kinds of reasons that, if you don't have the right flow of estrogen, progesterone, it's not going to be your usual cycle. And you might have lots of what we call eggless cycles and ovulatory cycles. Eggless cycles really really screw up your menstrual flow, and it can be a huge buildup. And I talk about that in the book. You try not to sit on anything white or not wear white pants. You go out of the house with extra size Kotex, or maybe before you've even gotten out of the house at that stage, you may go through 2 super Tampax. I mean, that's the time when the reason all that bleeding is happening is because you've had a lot of estrogen buildup. You may have had an eggless cycle and not even know it. And then you get buildup for 2 months, and then all of a sudden you get flooding. Flooding is a real thing, but it's telling you I mean, it's certainly one of the biggest pains in the neck of going through this stage is having flooding. And of course, we can help fix that for women. You don't have to suffer that. So please go to your doctor if you're having flooding for sure. At any rate, all of this is got the communication between the brain and the ovary is what I call sputtering ovary syndrome because the ovary is not responding. I think of the pituitary as
Yeah,
being
she's ignoring.
she's ignoring.
She's like,
No, and the conductor, the pituitary is like a conductor of a symphony. The pituitary is like all of the hormone glands in the whole body. It's up there like telling them what to do by putting out little signals from hormones from the pituitary. And as some instruments doesn't start playing loud enough, it starts to scream at that instrument by making more and more of these signals to like play louder, play louder, play louder. And it's like the ovary is retiring. It says, forget it. But then all of a sudden it might listen for a month or two and then even squirt out higher hormones than you've ever had before.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't realize sometimes you have like more breast tenderness, more estrogen, and more buildup in your uterus. So you get a heavier period in the next 30 to 60 days. So that's what's happening in what we call the lovely transition. But we doctors are here to help you with that transition. You do not have to suffer all of this. But that's the rock and roll. But the communication between the brain and the ovary is sort of breaking down at that point a bit. And so I guess that's probably a lot of what the brain fog piece comes also from not enough sleep and from the estrogen you're being jerked around a lot by your hormones.
Yeah, I was going to say, one of the things I've noticed of running so many labs on women is, especially with the way that we are operating today, I call it the standard American lifestyle, is that we see progesterone levels precipitously lower than we would maybe even expect, in early 40s, even late 30s. Sometimes I see it. And that chill pill that we're really relying on, she's just not there. And so I see a lot of women coming to me, especially in perimenopause. They're feeling very anxious. They're feeling very on edge, irritable, and not like themselves. And I think that has a lot to do with the brain kind of like, where's my hormones? What's going on here?
And it's the right sequence of the
Yeah.
hormones too. Remember?
Yes, it is.
And
Yeah.
all of us know about PMS. About 80 to 90% of women know what PMS is. They've had it at some point. Some people have it worse than others. But the reason that's important to kind of know something about that, because big corollary in the transition and perimenopause, which is what's happening at that 2 days before you start bleeding in your regular cycle, is that the progesterone is dropping like a rock really quickly. And that sets up all of the whole thing, everything in the uterus to flush out all the blood out of the uterus for your period. But it's also causing a lot of havoc in your brain because the progesterone in your body makes this really cool hormone in the brain we call it allo for short. It's a metabolite of progesterone, which makes you feel really calm and chill. And it hits all the same receptors as Valium. It hits all what we call the Valium receptors in the brain where you're feeling pretty chill. And then all of a sudden, when it starts to drop like a rock the day or so before your period starts, in this irritable, almost Valium withdrawal in your brain because your progesterone drops so fast. And that's when I call it in my clinic, the crying over dog food commercials.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
You can just cry at the drop of a hat, or you're angry, or you can get irritable.
Really
things
angry.
that your partner doesn't do, like whatever they do, they leave their underwear all over the place, or they don't do this, or they leave the refrigerator door open, whatever the heck they do. The
empty milk carton, whatever the thing is.
Whatever it is, and you don't, usually it's like, okay, oh well, it's not so great. But then on those days, it's like you can just like fly off the handle at him. It's like your anger can go from 0 to 60 really fast because you're not having this calming thing of progesterone. So the reason I focus on that right now, because that is kind of what can be happening in different days through your whole cycle during the transition days and during the perimenopause. It can be jerked up and down, and you have a lot of eggless cycles, more and more eggless cycles. And when you have an eggless cycle, you don't make progesterone. And so
no, you don't. You can't.
You can't. There's no progesterone.
Ovulation's the main event.
Right.
Without ovulation, there is no progesterone.
And it's not around. So if you're not ovulating, you're not having progesterone, and your brain is not happy with that because it's been built up with the estrogen to such a high fever pitch, right before the ovulation was supposed to happen, that your brain has not then been given the sequence of then the progesterone to calm everything back down again.
I just wanted you to speak into that because that is just that is such a reality for so many women in this transition. And it feels like such an assault to the brain, assault to our mood.
And you don't, the thing is like the rug got pulled out and you don't know
Yes.
what happened. You know what I mean? It's like the rug's pulled out and you don't know what just happened to you. And you don't realize that what's going on behind the scenes is that your hormones are not in the right sequence, and that some of your progesterone is not there, and that you're going to feel you're irritable and crabby, and you're going to not be able to focus. And that's because the sequence of hormones isn't what your brain needs and is used to. So that's why we often stick women during this phase on a constant, constant birth control pill where you have the same amount of estrogen, the same amount of progesterone. You don't get the heavy bleeding. Some women need to go to that to kind of get themselves back in balance. Not everybody, but at any rate, it's good to know what's happening to you. I think I like my saying in the book, which is biology is destiny unless you know what it's doing to you.
I totally resonate with that. And I think women, there's a lot of different options we have out there. Like you said, go and talk to your practitioner. Even bioidentical progesterone is a great option. Like there's a lot of different options. It could be supplementation that can help manage some of this as well. And so just kind of really exploring, but also just the knowing that this is as uncomfortable as it can be. And I know it can feel like a struggle, and there's lots of ways that we can address those. It's temporary. It is this temporary phase that we're going to move on to the other side, and things are going to feel a lot different. I want to talk about that other side. I want to say that we got through perimenopause. We were able to manage it with as much grace and ease as possible. Clearly, at this point in our lives, I know a lot of people in their 50s are thinking about longevity, are thinking about their brain and how it's working, how they're showing up, how they're stepping into their wisdom, and what they want to do with intention moving forward. What are some of the biggest pitfalls? I know a lot of women at this time are starting to notice some brain fog, are definitely concerned about it. What are some things that they can do, that we can do, that can help mitigate that fogginess, that word that just fluttered away right in the middle of a sentence, right? What are some hidden dangers that we should be mindful of or concerned about when it comes to, I mean, clearly a lack of sleep is a big one here, right? Certain foods that we're eating could be causing more brain and gut inflammation that we would love. Not moving our body, right? Having a sedentary lifestyle is going to wear on us. But are there specific toxins or prescriptions or just things like that we should be mindful of as well as we navigate this next beautiful journey?
Let's just realize that the brain loves estrogen. And if you do it too late, I mean, by the time you're 60, it's too late with the estrogen thing. So I think that's something that medicine and research is going to have to really deal with, because the 20 years of no research in this area because of the Women's Health Initiative study. It's the 20th anniversary right now of that study. It's 20 years. My colleagues at the NIH told me when it first came out, Louann, this will put estrogen study in females back 20 years. There will be nothing for 20 years. And I didn't believe it at the time, but it's true, as you know, right? Perimenopausal, menopausal brains are not something that have been researched, and the estrogen piece of that is clear. I just wanted to say that as we move on to talking about all kinds of other things that, like we did the sleep already, which is really, really critical. This thing about forgetting the word that you were thinking of, or like you're moving on to something else, like the balancing in terms of like what the brain does, the two front lobes of the brain, you're able to keep two things in mind at once often. But when you start to then focus on one of them, that other thing that's just left behind in the waiting room of your brain, it usually you can get back to it often. But sometimes when you go back to it, there's nothing there. You knew you left something in the waiting room, but you can't think of the word. You can't think of what it was you wanted to say, et cetera, et cetera. So that's a reality of life. So, and yet that's what's happening. So that a little bit of focus is going to be changing to what you realize is you're going to be focusing on one thing, because the one thing that you are doing and focusing on, just forget about that thing in the waiting room on the other side of your brain, because you need to that's why I say you start to get hyper-focused on what you're doing, just the here and now of what you're doing. And it really causes you to become much better at focusing on one thing at a time. So that's something to look forward to. You're able to just keep moving along. And if someone interrupts you, you learn to say, please come back later, or let me finish what I'm doing first. You really learn to take charge of your own, doing things in a sequential way that works for you. So that's why I say often you learn to speak your mind. And the aspects of having no inflammation, the least inflammatory diet that you can have, the best, not too much exercise because that can cause inflammation if you're really over amping it. But if you're doing what's right for you, the right balance of the exercise for you, that also keeps everything functioning well, but not too much inflammation. And we all know about the microbiome in the gut, where the research on that is still in its infancy, really. But we do know that we want to keep. I like to think of them as all these little babies down there that we're just trying to feed and keep as healthy as possible by eating our probiotics and having our healthy fibers, all of that kind of stuff, and having your healthy fats. The really balanced diet. Really, your brain really likes consistency of a healthy diet as well. So there's all kinds of things. I know for myself, it's like I recently got into a little like spate of like really liking ice cream at the at the end of dinner or the end of the day, and it's way too much sugar for me at once. So it crashes my energy, crashes my brain focus. As much as I love it, it's kind of like heroin to me. I like the sugar, but it really does not work. So we have to just take charge of some of those kinds of things that we do have charge of that will be very helpful to our brain function. And keeping engaged with your life is what it's all about at this stage. Your brain is now not having to have this changes every single really day of the month with the fluctuating hormones that are washing in and washing out. So I say, baby, grab the brass ring and enjoy it, and like you have a whole new opportunity to have more new purpose in life and a new clarity of thought. And also it coincides for a lot of women in their early mid 50s with coming empty nest time, where the whole mommy brain is like been really focused on children that are in the house that you're caring for, which is a wonderful phase of our life. But we're going into another phase where some of our dance card is like open now, and we get to choose. I mean, choose some things that would be just delicious for you to take on and do that you really have been holding off and but wanting to do. So it's a really wonderful time in your life, ladies, to get to do some things that are just right now sitting on the shelf waiting for you to get this new kind of time for authenticity in your life and clearer vision and becoming more purposefully engaged.
I think that's really the ticket is just becoming so intentional of just realizing, the newfound energy you're going to get, the newfound clarity. And then really just, there's going to be more time and more space to really decide what you want to do. As you had mentioned earlier, this many decades that we're talking about that we're going to get to reclaim, which I think is so excited. I would love to segue over to some of the research hacks you talk about in the book for fending off any concerns around dementia, or even just, the flip side of that, of like, how do we increase that longevity? Like, how do we ensure that we are as sharp as a tack in our 80s, in our 90s, that we're feeling like we're still functioning incredibly well in those years?
Right. So I'm going to give you guys some fun facts of like studies that are out there. So there's one very cool study that studied women in their 80s and their cognition. And those women that were the sharpest at the top of the heap for cognition, they surprisingly found correlation with that was that those women also had the best leg strength. So clearly there's something between muscle strength and cognition that goes together. And so I tell women that keep your muscles strong, because there's a compound that's released by your muscles that actually is a signal to the brain. It's not just the nervous system that signals from your muscles to the brain, but there's actual compounds that go into your blood that signal to the brain. And one of the things, the biggest muscles in the brain is your glutes, right? So squeezing your glutes and ladies, doing 1,000 butt squeezes a day. That's a lot to do, but just every time you sit down, every time you brush your teeth or go to a counter, think about doing your butt squeezes, because that's going to help your cognition. So this aspect of keeping yourself moving, the muscles in your body, really tend to them, keep them healthy. That's going to, because the blood flow to your brain is everything, and the compounds that go to your brain is going to keep yourself in best cognition and the best physical health into your 70s, 80s, 90s, and beyond. So that is going to help you with all those things. And obviously, really attending to other medical things, like we doctors know, which is like really attending to the issue of your cholesterol. If you need to have that rebalance, if you can do that through diet, great. If you can't, then you need to have some of that rebalanced, because you don't want a lot of cholesterol plaques running around in your heart, your vessels, and your brain. You would like to, handle any other medical condition that you have. And also the mobility. A lot of women in their 60s start to have, a knee this or an ankle this. You need to really take charge of getting the physical therapy you need, whatever it is that you need to keep yourself mobile. Will basically keep yourself strong and healthy and focused. So that's very good for both your longevity and particularly for your brain. And I think they've decided that this thing about doing the crossword puzzles and doing all these puzzles and things, if you love to do them, if they're a passion for you, do them. But if you're just doing them and just forcing yourself to do them, they actually haven't been shown to correlate necessarily with brain cognition at a later age, which a lot of us will go, Yahoo, I'm glad that, if you love doing what you love, that you feel like you get that dopamine rush, you get some juice for doing it, then really embrace that and do more of that.
How about the thing that popped into my mind is relationships, is like maintaining those best friend relationships. I was wondering, have you looked at some of the research there? I know that is
yes. Isn't that wonderful? That especially the one that's really surprising for us in medicine, we know that anything that shows an increase in longevity is like really kind of surprising. But one of the things they found is that people that go out with 3 to 4 of their girlfriends at least twice a week had increased longevity in the study.
Love it.
Isn't that wonderful?
Yeah, I think, and yeah, I mean, connection, touch, hugs, connecting with our best friends. I just think that's it's such a win in so many directions for women in general. But it's been shown time and time again. It's a major indicator for longevity.
So I really believe that building your community, choosing community, volunteering, hanging out with your girlfriends, talking with your girlfriends or sisters, even on the phone. I mean, whatever it is. Of course, during the pandemic, we've all had, a decrease in everything with our social connections. So I think all of us are really longing for that in a really important way, and honor that. Honor your urges to have connections. And, connections are that's what the human brain is all about. The human brain is all about social connections with others. And so, I think that also there's all the family relations and, all these things. As soon as you look under the hood for any of us in our connections in our family and things that go well and don't go well with family connections, like find a space to work on some forgiveness, because don't let anything ruin your connections with other people. Because it's, life is short, and anything that's getting in the way of an important connection in your life, honestly, try to look into your heart and find some way to work on that relationship. Find a way to improve that relationship. And when you do that, working on improving your relationship with yourself. Who do we live with most? We live with ourselves. So finding ways to improve our relationship with ourselves during these years. And you can find that through meditation. Some people find it through prayer. However you find it, it's really, really correlated with both physical health and mental health through all of the later years of your life. So develop your relationship with yourself in whatever way you can.
Well, Louann, honey, this is so powerful. I am so excited for people to get a hold of the book, The Upgrade, because I know you're going to go deeper into, if you loved this, you're going to go deeper into this.
Yeah.
And I know it is available everywhere.
It just came out. You're right. And listen, you can pet it. It feels, they made a really smooth, like a pettable cover. It feels
it's beautiful.
It's like, thank you. At any rate, I really would love your audience to get a chance to have it and take it into their heart and share it with their sisters and mothers.
I love that too. Well, thank you so much for coming on. Thank you for sharing your wisdom.
It's so my honor. And good luck to all of you as you go through your transition and into your upgrade. Thank you so much for having me.